Welcome to the start of your web developer journey. We will be starting off with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Why these three technologies? Let's take a look. Although the words Internet and World Wide Web get used interchangeably, the World Wide Web is actually part of the Internet. So the World Wide Web is where websites and resources can be accessed through the Internet using the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. One thing you'll notice about the Internet is that for several different technologies, it uses several different protocols for transmitting data. For instance, with email, it'll use the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. The domain name system has its own protocol as well. And of course, the file transfer protocol. And let's say you want to use Telnet. You want to open up a terminal on another computer. Well, you have the simple transmission protocol for that as well. When a user types in a web address into the browser and hits enter, a request is sent to the server. The server then sends a response back, which may contain HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. HTML will add elements to the page, giving it structure. CSS will add style to the page, and JavaScript can affect how it behaves. So if you click on something, it can make an event happen. HTML uses tags to define the beginning and end of an HTML element. So looking at our H1 element here, we have an opening tag and a closing tag. Notice that the closing tag has a / and everything in between is its content. Now, this will affect how it appears on the page. Notice that the text for our H1 element is bigger and bolder than our text for our paragraph element down here. And it also affects, say, the spacing as well. So it gives some structure to it. Notice that the spacing between these elements is less than the spacing we have between these elements. Now, these tags do more than just affect how it appears on the page. Now, for instance, an H1 element will say, hey, this is the main point of what this page is trying to convey, where a paragraph would be something that's supporting that point. So anyway, let's take a look at an example where we don't have any HTML. So in this example here, we don't have any HTML tags. Even though this is a HTML file, we have the .html extension on it, it will not look like HTML when rendered in the web page. Notice that it doesn't even keep track of carriage returns. It just piles it all together. So we don't have any structure to it. CSS is short for Cascading Style Sheets. Here we have 4 different pages with the exact same HTML. The only difference is they have different CSS. As you can see, just by changing the CSS, we can drastically change the appearance of each page. If you like these examples, go ahead and go to csszengarden.com and take a look. JavaScript will be used to make our websites more interactive. In our simple example here, the user's just clicking a button and a message is being displayed. Now, there's several different things we could do this. A user, for instance, could enter their weight into a form and we could return what their weight would be on Jupyter. Or, for instance, if we really want to get ambitious, we could even write a game in JavaScript. So there's a lot that we can do here to really make that experience for the user that much better. We're going to take a look at the 3 main paths to become a web developer. The first one being the front-end developer. The front-end developer is going to focus on the visual aspects on the website, what the user can see and how they interact with it. Now, of course, we're going to need to know about how the internet works, but you're going to see our first 3 technologies that we were talking about: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And if you want to take a look at this roadmap in further depth, it's at roadmap.sh/frontend. They also have one for the backend as well. The backend developer will focus on things that the user may never necessarily see. For instance, we're going to need a web server that's going to take requests and serve back responses. We're also going to need to be able to store data, so we're going to need databases as well. And being that the backend developer handles the databases, it comes with its own unique security concerns that they're going to be responsible for. Now, let's say if we want to serve data instead of serving a web page, we're going to need a application programming interface. So this would be something that would also fall under their domain as well. Now, notice we'll still need an understanding of the internet, but when it comes to front-end knowledge, it's going to be a basic front-end knowledge. So we're still going to have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript we'll need to know. But instead of seeking out a mastery of these three technologies, our focus and our time and energy is going to be better served focus on many of these other different technologies instead. But we will still need a basic knowledge of those. So that's why we're going to be starting with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it won't really affect us whether we go front end or back end. Our third option is going to be the full stack developer. The full stack developer is going to need a working knowledge in the front end as well as the back end. And you might think since they need to know both of these, they're going to make more money than the front end developer and the back end developer, which simply isn't true. We take a look at salaries at Indeed.com. The full stack developer is going to make a little bit more than $100,000 a year, with the front end developer making a little more than $102,000 a year, and the back end developer making a little bit more than $115,000 a year. Now, how could this be? Well, this is the market speaking back to us saying, hey, if you're a jack of all trades and you know the front end and the back end, that's great. But if you can specialize in the front end or the back end, that's even better. So keep that in mind when you're making your decision on which way you want to go. Now, if you want to create a lot of your own projects, you're probably going to need to know the full stack as well. Or if you're working for a smaller startup, you're good shot. You're going to need to be a full stack developer anyway, but just some food for thought. And looking back at our roadmap, as we said, we will need to start with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Looking at the Stack Overflow 2022 survey, now this is of all the programmers on the languages where they've done extensive development work in over the past year. As we can see, 65% have used JavaScript. Over 55% have used HTML and CSS. Now, this isn't just web developers. This is all sorts of developers. So even if you move around a lot, JavaScript and HTML, there's still a pretty good chance you're going to use these skills once you've developed them. So anyway, I hope this has helped you decide a little bit in which way you're going, and you still have some time because, I mean, you're going to need to know at least a basic knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. With the big difference, if you're going to be a front-end developer, you're going to go ahead and create a mastery or attain a mastery in those technologies, where the back-end developer wants to get to the basic knowledge. They're going to go ahead and focus on some of those other technologies. So I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one.